Ever walk into like a furniture store and you
Yeah.
get hit with that, I don't know, that new smell?
Oh, absolutely.
It's kind of like almost appealing in a way.
Yeah.
But what is that really?
Right.
It's VOCs, right?
Hmm.
Volatile organic compounds.
Yeah, it is.
And we're diving into that today, VOCs, but specifically in restoration, how those exposures are managed.
Hmm.
Because it's one thing to get a whiff of new carpet, but when you're dealing with a whole restoration project, that's a whole other level of VOCs we're talking about.
Yeah, you're right. And it's interesting because you mentioned the new carpet smell. A lot of people don't realize that that comes from formaldehyde,
Oh, wow.
which is a known carcinogen.
Really?
And so when you think about restoration, where you have all different types of materials, adhesives, sealants, cleaning products, the amount of VOCs that could be present is pretty significant.
Yeah. So paint me a picture then. What are the real health risks here in a restoration scenario? We're not just talking like, a stuffy nose, right?
Right. Yeah, it can be a lot more serious than that. For some people, it is just some mild irritation, itchy eyes, scratchy throat.
Yeah.
But others are much more susceptible to VOCs and can experience respiratory issues, headaches, dizziness.
Wow.
And then long-term exposure to certain VOCs has been linked to some chronic health problems.
Okay, so this is definitely something we need to, be aware of and manage carefully.
Yeah.
So let's talk about solutions. What's I guess, the first line of defense when you're tackling VOCs during, say, a restoration project?
Well, ventilation is a big one.
Okay.
But we're not just talking about cracking open a window.
Right.
We're talking like restoration professionals use specialized equipment like negative air machines.
Okay, I've heard of those. Those sound pretty heavy duty. So what makes them so effective, especially in like a contained restoration environment where you might have, a concentrated area where VOCs are being released?
Yeah, they're very powerful. They essentially create negative pressure within a contained space. So you can think of it as like a reverse vacuum cleaner.
Okay, so instead of blowing air around, it's sucking the bad stuff out.
Exactly. So it creates a constant flow of air from cleaner areas to the affected area, and that contaminated air is exhausted outside, so it doesn't linger and build up.
That's good. So it's protecting, I guess, not just the people who are going to be in that space later, but also the restoration team who's working there at the time.
Right. Yeah, because you don't want them breathing that in all day while they're working.
Right. And it's not just, the immediate effects. It's that, like you said, that buildup over time, right?
Exactly. Yeah, those VOCs can linger for months, even years.
So ventilation is key,
Yeah.
but it's not the only thing, right? What other kind of tools are in a restoration professional's toolkit?
Yeah, so in addition to negative air machines, you'll often see air filtration systems with specialized filters. And these aren't like your average furnace filters. We're talking about activated carbon filters.
Okay, yeah. You see those advertised, but what's like the difference? What makes those so special?
Activated carbon is really porous.
Okay.
So it has a huge surface area for trapping those VOC molecules. Think of it like a sponge, but on a microscopic level.
Okay.
So as the air passes through the filter, those VOCs get trapped in the carbon and they're removed from the air.
Oh, that's really interesting. So it's not just about pushing air around, it's about cleaning the air as it moves, too.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. It's kind of a multi-layered approach to air purification there, which I guess makes sense given the complexity of the problem.
Yeah.
But what about the materials themselves? Is there a way to, like, minimize VOCs right at the source? Because, prevention is better than a cure, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're talking about, like, using different kinds of paints, adhesives, sealants, that kind of thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. All of those things traditionally have been very high in VOCs,
Right.
but now there are more and more low VOC and even no VOC products out there specifically designed for restoration.
Oh, that's great. So you don't have to sacrifice performance for, health or sustainability.
Exactly. And the performance has actually come a long way too.
Okay.
They're not just good enough anymore. In many cases, they meet or even exceed the performance of the traditional products.
That's great. Do you have any, like, I don't know, numbers on that, on how much of a difference those low VOC alternatives can make?
Yeah, for sure. Switching to low VOC paints alone can reduce VOC emissions by up to 70% compared to traditional oil-based paints.
Wow, 70%.
Yeah.
That's huge.
And paint is one of the biggest contributors in a restoration project, so.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, that's amazing. But how do we know that, with all this, like, You can't see it, right? So
Y-
how do we know that it's actually working, that those mitigation efforts are doing their job?
Well, that's where real-time monitoring comes in.
Okay, tell me more about that. What does that actually look like in a real project?
So they have these specialized VOC monitors that they use,
Okay.
and they place them strategically throughout the site, and they provide real-time readings of the VOC concentrations in the air.
So it's like an early warning system,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly, yeah.
So if it starts creaking up, then they can, like, adjust the ventilation, add more filtration.
Exactly.
Okay.
It allows for that immediate intervention so that you're staying ahead of it.
That makes a lot of sense. And what about, like, the people who are doing the work, the restoration workers themselves? What about PTE? How does that play into all of this?
Yeah, so PPE is critical, absolutely
We're
essential.
talking respirators, that kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah. Respirators with specific cartridges that are designed to filter out VOCs.
Oh, okay.
So that way, even if there are VOCs present, they're not breathing them in.
That's good. So it sounds like we've covered like a lot of the current practices for, mitigating VOCs in restoration.
We have.
But I'm really interested to hear about these, the scientific advancements that you were talking about, these kind of like game-changing technologies that are coming out. What are we looking at there?
Yeah, it's a really exciting time to be talking about VOC reduction because we're seeing advancements that go beyond just minimizing exposure. We're talking about solutions that actually target those VOCs at a molecular level.
Okay, now that's what I'm talking about. So what are some of the most like promising advancements out there? Those things that could really change how we approach this whole VOC thing.
One really cool area is the development of water-based and bio-based materials.
So like more natural ingredients rather than, the harsh chemicals.
Exactly. Things like plant-based oils and resins to replace some of those petroleum-based
Oh,
solvents.
nice. So better for us, better for the planet.
Exactly.
What else? What other technologies are out there that have you excited?
And nanotechnology is a big one.
Okay, nanotechnology. Now we're talking like sci-fi stuff here.
I know, it sounds futuristic.
Yeah. But how does that work, though, with VOCs?
So we're talking about nanoparticles, which are extremely small, to enhance coatings.
Okay.
And they can create these really durable, resistant surfaces, but with far fewer VOCs than traditional coatings.
So you get all the benefits, but like without the bad stuff.
Exactly.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Anything else? You got any more sci-fi for me?
Well, what about a technology that actually breaks down VOCs at a molecular level, even after they've been released into the air?
Okay, now that's just next level. How does that even work?
It's called photocatalytic oxidation,
Oh,
or PCO, and it uses something called a photocatalyst, often titanium dioxide.
okay.
And when this is activated by UV light, it transforms VOCs into harmless byproducts like water and carbon dioxide.
Wow. So it's like a built-in air purifier that runs on light.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
That's amazing. So where do you see that going, like, in the future of restoration?
I think it has huge potential. It's still pretty new in its application for post-restoration cleanup, but, imagine a future where you have PCO technology, not just in lighting fixtures, but also incorporated into paints, flooring materials, furniture, even.
Wow. So the future of restoration is looking pretty bright and clean.
I think so.
That's great.
And speaking of positive changes, we've also seen a surge in the use of green seal and LED certified products in restoration.
Right. So it's not just the individual products or technologies, but like a whole mindset about sustainable building.
Exactly.
That's good. It sounds like we've covered a lot of like, the theory and the concepts here.
Yeah.
But I always like to bring it back to like a real world example.
Right.
And you mentioned earlier, case study, a fire damaged building.
Yeah.
So can you walk us through that? Like, how did these VOC mitigation strategies actually play out in a real restoration project? So this building, like, how much damage are we talking? Was it like a total gut job or?
This one was pretty extensive. Multi-story office building, fire and smoke damage throughout.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
like right from the start, they knew that VOCs were going to be a major concern.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got the burn materials themselves, which can off-gas for weeks, and then you've got all the restoration materials on top of that.
Right, right. So it's like a double whammy.
Exactly. They brought in those negative air machines we talked about, set up containment barriers, and really focused on creating that negative pressure environment to vent those VOCs out.
Okay, so get the air moving, get those VOCs out of there. But then what? You got to clean the air too, right?
Right. So they used a combination of portable air scrubbers with activated carbon filters, plus some larger HEPA filtration systems for a multi-layered approach.
So it's like they were constantly monitoring the situation and then, like, moving those systems around, adjusting them based on what they were seeing.
Exactly. They were really adaptable and responsive, adjusting their strategies as the project went on.
Okay, so they're controlling the air, but what about the materials themselves? Do they use, the low VOC stuff we were talking about?
Oh, absolutely. Low VOC paints, adhesives, sealants, the whole nine yards. They knew that minimizing VOCs at the source was just as important as removing what was already there.
Okay, that makes sense. But they did something even cooler, right? You were telling me about some kind of like high-tech monitoring system they used.
Yeah, they had these sensors that didn't just measure VOC levels.
Hmm.
They also tracked humidity and temperature.
Really? Why is that important?
Well, it turns out those things can actually affect how much certain materials off gas.
Oh, wow, I had no idea.
Yeah.
So they were like really, really trying to understand the whole picture of the indoor environment.
Exactly. And it paid off. They were able to achieve an 85% reduction in VOC levels compared to a similar project where they didn't take these measures.
85%. That's incredible.
Yeah, it really shows what a difference these strategies can make.
Wow. So I guess the takeaway here is it's not just about, putting out the fire. It's about what happens after the fire, right? Making sure those spaces are rebuilt the right way.
That's exactly right. It's about creating spaces that are healthy and safe, for the long haul.
Well said. So for our listeners who might be, renovating their homes or even just like picking out new furniture, what's like the one thing you want them to remember about VOCs?
Just remember that knowledge is power. The more you understand about VOCs, the better equipped you are to make healthy choices.
Love it. So next time you walk into a furniture store and get that new smell, stop and think. Could be VOCs, and you have the power to clear the air and breathe easier. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into VOCs and restoration.